Before we begin this incredible Viking tale, please hit that like button if you're ready for an epic story. Subscribe to our channel for more amazing Viking legends, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps us bring these timeless stories to life. The cold mountain wind howled through the pine trees as Torvin made his way up the treacherous rocky path. His weathered boots crunched against the frozen ground, each step taking him further from the only home he had ever known. Behind him, far below in the valley, smoke still rose from the chimneys of Ironhold village. But those fires no longer warmed his heart. They belonged to a place that had cast him out. 3 days had passed since the village council declared his exile. 3 days since he had challenged Chief Grimwald's decision to raid the peaceful farming settlement across the fjord. Torvin had stood before the gathered villagers, his voice strong despite the trembling in his chest, arguing that honor lay in protecting the innocent, not in taking from those who had done no wrong. The chief's face had turned red with rage, his fist slamming against the wooden table. "You question my leadership, Torvin Stormheart," Grimwald had bellowed. "Then you question the very foundation of our clan." Now, as Torvin climbed higher into the mountains, he reflected on that moment. His father, the legendary warrior Olaf Stormheart, had always taught him that true strength came from protecting those who could not protect themselves. Perhaps that lesson had been his downfall, but Torvin could not bring himself to regret standing for what he believed was right. The path grew steeper as he ascended, and the air became thinner. Ancient stories spoke of these mountains as the domain of the old spirits, places where the veil between the mortal world and the realm of ancestors grew thin. Most villagers avoided these heights, preferring the safety of the valley below. But for an exile like Torvin, these forbidden peaks offered the only sanctuary. As evening approached, the sky turned a deep purple, and the first stars began to appear. Torvin had been walking for hours, his legs aching and his water supply running low. He needed to find shelter soon, or the mountain cold would claim him before sunrise. Scanning the rocky landscape, he spotted what appeared to be a cave opening nestled between two massive boulders. The cave was deeper than he had expected, extending far back into the mountain's heart. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Torvin noticed something extraordinary. The walls seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light, as if tiny stars had been embedded in the stone itself. The air here felt different too, warmer despite the altitude, and filled with an energy that made his skin tingle. Moving deeper into the cave, Torvin discovered a vast chamber that took his breath away. In the center of the space, surrounded by smooth, glowing stones, lay the most magnificent sight he had ever witnessed. 5 enormous eggs, each one nearly the size of his torso, rested in carefully arranged nests of soft moss and downy feathers. The shells shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and dance in the mysterious light, deep blues that reminded him of summer storms, rich golds like autumn wheat, and silvery greens like the northern sea. But these were no ordinary bird eggs. The shells pulsed gently, as if great hearts beat within them. Torvin had heard the ancient songs and stories passed down through generations, tales of the great winged guardians who once soared through northern skies. Most dismissed these as myths, children's stories told around winter fires, yet here before him lay proof that the legends held truth. As he approached the nests, Torvin felt a presence watching him, not malevolent but ancient and wise, as if the mountain itself was evaluating his worthiness. The eggs seemed to pulse brighter at his approach, and he could swear he heard the faintest sound, like gentle humming or perhaps distant singing. One egg, slightly smaller than the others and colored like fresh snow with streaks of ice blue, trembled as he drew near. Without thinking, Torvin reached out his hand, stopping just short of touching the shell. The warmth radiating from it was incredible, and in that moment he felt a connection unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if the life within was reaching out to him, recognizing something kindred in his spirit. "Where are your parents, little ones?" he whispered to the eggs. "Why are you here alone?" As if in answer to his question, Torvald noticed scattered around the chamber the remains of what must have been a great nest. Broken shells, far larger than the eggs before him, suggested that other creatures had once hatched here, but of the adult guardians there was no sign. Had they been hunted? Had they simply moved on, leaving these unhatched young behind? The responsibility hit him like a physical blow. These magnificent beings, whatever they were, lay vulnerable and unprotected. In his travels as a warrior, Torvald had encountered many wonders, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He thought of his exile, of the empty years that stretched before him with no clan, no purpose, no family to protect. Perhaps the spirits had guided him here for a reason. That night, Torvald made his bed at the chamber's entrance, positioned so he could watch over the eggs while keeping an eye on the cave mouth. He rationed his food carefully, knowing he would need to venture down the mountain soon to hunt and gather supplies. But as he lay on the hard stone, listening to the gentle pulsing rhythm of the eggs, he felt a peace he had not known since childhood. The next morning brought a light snowfall, and Torvald realized that winter was approaching faster at this altitude. The eggs would need constant warmth to survive the coming cold. Using his knowledge of survival and construction, he began gathering materials to improve their shelter. He collected deadwood from the tree line below, stones for building fire pits, and moss to insulate the nests further. Day by day, Torvald established routines. He would hunt small game in the early morning, gather berries and roots in the afternoon, and spend the evenings tending small fires around the nests to maintain the warmth. He spoke to the eggs often, telling them stories of the world below, of great battles and brave deeds, of his father's adventures and the legends of their people. Weeks passed, and Torvald noticed changes in the eggs. They had grown slightly larger, and their shells seemed thicker, more resilient. The smallest egg, the one that had first responded to his presence, now pulsed with a steady rhythm that reminded him of a strong heartbeat. Sometimes, late at night when the fires burned low, he thought he could see shadows moving within the translucent shells. It was during the first heavy snowfall of winter that Torvald encountered his first challenge as protector. He awoke to the sound of voices echoing from outside the cave, rough, crude voices, speaking in a dialect he recognized as belonging to the mountain bandits who preyed on travelers. These men were dangerous, desperate, and would see the eggs as valuable treasures to be sold to the highest bidder. Torvald quickly extinguished the fires and moved to the cave entrance, his sword drawn and ready. Through the swirling snow, he could see 3 figures approaching, their faces hidden beneath thick fur hoods. They moved with the confidence of men who believed themselves the only predators on this mountain. "Smoke! Coming from up here!" one of them called to his companions. "Someone's made themselves comfortable in our territory." Torvald stepped into the cave mouth, making himself visible. "This place is under my protection," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the winter air. "Turn back now and no one needs to be hurt." The bandits laughed, clearly amused by the sight of a single warrior challenging 3 armed men. Their leader, a scarred man with a broken nose, stepped forward. "1 against 3? You must be mad, old man. Step aside, and we might let you live long enough to crawl back down this mountain." But Torvald had not survived countless battles by backing down from difficult odds. More importantly, he had something precious to protect now, something that gave his life meaning again. "I have given you fair warning," he replied calmly. "What happens next is your choice." The fight was brief but intense. Torvald's years of experience and his desperate motivation proved stronger than the bandits' numbers. When the snow settled, 3 still forms lay in the white powder, and Torvald stood breathing heavily, small cuts on his arms, but otherwise unharmed. He felt no joy in the victory, only relief that the threat had passed. As he dragged the bodies away from the cave, Torvald wondered how many more would come. The mountain attracted all manner of desperate people, and word would eventually spread about the lone warrior living in the heights. He would need to be constantly vigilant, always ready to defend his adopted charges. That evening, as he tended to his wounds and rebuilt the warming fires, Torvin noticed something remarkable. The eggs were glowing brighter than ever before, pulsing in perfect unison, as if responding to the danger they had faced together. The smallest egg trembled more vigorously, and for a moment he could have sworn he saw a tiny crack appear along its surface. "Soon, little ones," he whispered, settling down for the night. "Soon you'll be strong enough to face this world. Until then, I'll keep you safe." Spring arrived late in the high mountains, but when it came, it brought warmth and new life to the hidden chamber. Torvin had survived his first winter as guardian of the eggs, and both he and his charges had grown stronger. The eggs now hummed with vibrant energy, and their shells had taken on an almost crystalline quality that caught and reflected the chamber's mysterious light. Torvin himself had changed during the long winter months. His hair had grown longer and was now streaked with early silver, and his body bore the lean strength of a man who lived by his wits and will alone. He had developed an almost supernatural awareness of the mountain's rhythms, able to sense approaching weather or detect the presence of intruders from great distances. The attacks had continued throughout the winter. Word had somehow spread about the hermit warrior living in the Forbidden Peaks, and treasure hunters, desperate bandits, and even a few bold young warriors seeking to make their names had attempted to climb to his cave. Torvin had turned them all away, some through negotiation and intimidation, others through force when necessary. Each victory had cost him energy and supplies, but had also strengthened his resolve. On a warm morning in late spring, as Torvin prepared his usual meal of mountain herbs and dried meat, he heard a sound that made his heart race with anticipation. From within the smallest egg came a gentle tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. He approached the nest carefully, hardly daring to breathe, and watched as a tiny crack spread across the snow-white shell. The hatching process took the entire day. Torvin sat transfixed as the small creature within worked tirelessly to break free from its prison. First came a tiny snout, then a brilliant blue eye that seemed to hold ancient wisdom despite its newborn state. Finally, with a soft crackling sound, the shell split completely, and the most beautiful creature Torvin had ever seen emerged into the world. The hatchling was no larger than a house cat, with scales that shifted between silver and ice blue, depending on the angle of the light. Its wings, still wet and crumpled from the egg, would clearly be magnificent when fully developed, but it was the creature's eyes that truly captured Torvin's attention. Deep, intelligent, and filled with a recognition that spoke of bonds deeper than mere animal companionship. The young guardian, for Torvin now knew beyond doubt what these creatures truly were, looked directly at him, and made a sound like musical chimes caught in a gentle breeze. Without hesitation, it crawled from its nest and curled up against Torvin's warm hand, immediately falling into a peaceful sleep. Over the following days, the other eggs hatched in sequence. Each guardian emerged with its own unique coloring and personality, but all shared that same deep intelligence and immediate trust in their human protector. Torvin found himself caring for 5 magnificent young creatures who grew with incredible speed, their wings developing and their scales hardening into natural armor. The guardians, for Torvin refused to think of them as anything less than the legendary protectors of old, seemed to understand their vulnerable position instinctively. They remained hidden within the chamber during daylight hours, only emerging to practice flying during the deep darkness of night. Torvin watched these sessions with wonder, seeing how naturally they took to the air despite their youth. As summer progressed, the bond between Torvin and his charges deepened. They communicated through a combination of musical sounds, subtle body language, and what Torvin could only describe as shared emotions. When one of the guardians felt distress, he felt it too. When they experienced joy in their flying exercises, that happiness filled his own heart. But with their growth came new challenges. The guardians required more food than Torvin could easily provide, and their increasing size meant the chamber was becoming cramped. More concerning still, their presence was beginning to attract attention from sources far more dangerous than simple mountain bandits. It was in late summer that the greatest threat arrived. Torvin awoke one morning to find the mountain unnaturally quiet. No bird songs, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. His hard-earned instincts screamed danger, and he quickly moved to the cave entrance to investigate. Below, climbing the steep path with grim determination, came a force unlike any Torvin had faced before. Chief Grimwald himself led a party of 20 seasoned warriors, all equipped for a serious battle. Behind them came others, scholars, treasure hunters, and what appeared to be foreign merchants with exotic weapons and binding equipment. Torvin's heart sank as he realized the magnitude of what he faced. Someone had finally convinced Grimwald that valuable treasures lay hidden in the mountain peaks, treasures worth risking a significant force to claim. The presence of the foreign merchants suggested that word of the Guardians had spread far beyond the local villages. Torvin Stormheart! Grimwald's voice boomed across the mountainside. You have hidden yourself in these peaks long enough. Come down and face judgment for your defiance. But Torvin knew this was not about his past defiance. The gleaming nets and restraining devices carried by the merchants made their true purpose clear. They had come to capture the Guardians, to steal away the magnificent creatures he had spent a year protecting and nurturing. Behind him in the chamber, the Guardians stirred restlessly, sensing the approaching danger through their connection with their protector. The largest of them, whose scales shone like polished gold, moved to stand beside Torvin at the cave mouth. Though still not fully grown, the young Guardian was already impressive, standing nearly as tall as a man's waist, with wings that spanned twice that distance. I know why you've come, Torvin called down to the approaching force. And I tell you now, turn back. What you seek is not yours to take. Grimwald laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Old stories and children's tales have filled your head, Exile. You protect nothing but oversized lizards that will make us all rich when sold to the southern kingdoms. The insult to his beloved charges ignited a fury in Torvin that surprised him with its intensity. These were not mere animals to be bought and sold. They were the living embodiment of his people's greatest legends, creatures of wisdom and power that had chosen to trust him with their lives. You will not pass, Torvin declared, his sword singing as he drew it from its sheath. I have given them my word, and I will not break it. The battle that followed would later be remembered in songs and stories, though few would believe the full truth of what occurred. Torvin fought with the strength of a man possessed, his blade seeming to be everywhere at once as he held the narrow cave entrance against overwhelming odds. The path was treacherous and could only accommodate a few attackers at once, which helped even the numbers. But Torvin knew he could not hold them forever. As the afternoon wore on and his strength began to flag, the young Guardians made a choice that would change everything. Despite Torvin's desperate attempts to keep them hidden, they emerged from the chamber and took to the sky. Still too young for true combat, they could not fight directly, but their presence in the air created confusion and fear among the attackers. The sight of the legendary Guardians, even in their youth, shook the resolve of many in Grimwald's force. Several of the village warriors dropped their weapons and fled, unwilling to participate in what they now recognized as a violation of the most sacred taboos of their people. But the foreign merchants were made of different stuff. Their nets flew through the air, seeking to entangle the young Guardians and bring them down. One net found its mark, wrapping around the smallest Guardian, the first to hatch, Torvin's special favorite. The young creature fell toward the rocky ground, crying out in distress. Torvin's roar of rage echoed off the mountain peaks as he abandoned his defensive position and charged into the mass of enemies. His sword cut through net and rope, freeing his beloved charge, but the effort left him surrounded and outnumbered. The merchants closed in with their binding equipment, while the remaining warriors formed a circle around him. As weapons rose to strike the final blow, something extraordinary occurred. The air itself seemed to shimmer and grow thick, and a presence made itself known, ancient, powerful, and undeniably real. The temperature dropped suddenly, and a wind arose from nowhere, carrying with it voices that seemed to come from the mountain itself. The young guardians, still circling overhead, began to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with the sun. Their musical calls took on new harmonies, deeper and more complex, as if they were singing in harmony with unseen voices. The smallest guardian, the one Torvin had saved, flew down to land on his shoulder, its eyes now blazing with light that seemed to come from another world entirely. In that moment, Torvin understood the truth that had been hidden in the old stories. These creatures were more than magnificent animals. They were vessels for the spirits of the ancestors, the honored dead, who had chosen to return in new forms to guide and protect their descendants. And now, as he faced his final battle, those ancient spirits were making their presence known. The light that emanated from the guardians grew brighter, and suddenly Torvin felt their strength flowing into him. His exhausted muscles filled with new energy, his dulled reflexes sharpened to supernatural keenness. But more than that, he felt the presence of every warrior ancestor who had ever lived, standing with him in this moment of ultimate trial. The final phase of the battle was unlike anything witnessed in mortal memory. Torvin moved with speed and skill that defied human limitations, his sword guided by centuries of accumulated wisdom and experience. The young guardians swooped and dived around him, their very presence causing weapons to malfunction and nets to tangle uselessly. One by one, the remaining attackers fell or fled until only Chief Grimwald remained. The old chief stood panting and bloodied, his eyes wide with terror as he finally understood what he had attempted to destroy. "The ancestors have chosen," Torvin said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Leave this place and spread the word. The guardians have returned, and they are under divine protection." Grimwald stumbled backward, dropping his weapon. "The stories, they were all true," he whispered. "Forgive me, Torvin, I did not know. I did not believe." "Belief is not required," Torvin replied. "Only respect. Go now and see that this mountain is left in peace." As the broken remnants of the attacking force retreated down the mountain, Torvin felt a great weariness settle over him. The battle had taken more from him than just physical strength. He had drawn upon reserves of life force that could never be replenished. The guardians clustered around him, their musical voices now tinged with concern and sorrow. The smallest guardian nuzzled against his cheek, and in that touch, Torvin felt a communication deeper than words. The young creature understood what the battle had cost, and was offering to share its own life force to sustain its protector. But Torvin gently refused, knowing that such a gift would only delay the inevitable while diminishing the guardian's own bright future. "My part in this story is ending," he told his beloved charges, "but yours is just beginning. You are strong now, wise enough to protect yourselves, and the world needs you more than it needs one old warrior." That night, as the aurora borealis painted the sky in brilliant colors, Torvin sat with the guardians for the last time. They had grown so much since that first day when he found their eggs, and he could see in their eyes the ancient wisdom that was their birthright. Tomorrow, they would leave this mountain sanctuary and take their place in the larger world, guardians once again of the northern lands. As dawn approached, Torvin felt his strength finally leaving him, but there was no fear, no regret. He had found his purpose in protecting these magnificent beings, and through them he had become part of something far greater than himself. The smallest guardian curled up beside him one final time, its warmth a comfort in his final moments. When the sun rose fully, the guardians found their protector at peace, a gentle smile on his weathered face. But their grief was brief, for they could sense that his spirit had not departed. It had joined the chorus of ancestral voices that sang in the wind and whispered in the mountain stones. Over the following days, the guardians grew to their full, magnificent size, their wings spanning the sky as they took up their eternal vigil. They dispersed across the northern lands, becoming the stuff of new legends as they protected the innocent and punished those who would do harm to the defenseless. But they never forgot the mountain where they were born, or the warrior who had given his life to protect them. And sometimes, when the northern lights danced across the sky, travelers would report seeing 5 great shapes circling the sacred peak, singing in harmony with a voice that sounded remarkably like an old warrior telling stories around a campfire. In the village of Ironhold, the story of Torvin Stormheart and the Guardians became the most treasured tale of all. Children would gather around the fires on winter nights to hear how the exiled warrior found his greatest purpose in protecting creatures of legend, and how his sacrifice ensured that the Guardians would forever watch over the Northlands. And in the mountain cave where it all began, a small shrine appeared, built by unknown hands from stones that glowed with their own inner light. Pilgrims would sometimes make the dangerous journey to leave offerings there, not to ask for favors, but simply to honor the memory of a man who proved that true nobility lay not in wealth or power, but in the courage to protect those who could not protect themselves. Years passed, and the legend of Torvin Stormheart grew with each telling. The guardians he had protected became the greatest protectors the northern kingdoms had ever known, appearing whenever innocent people faced overwhelming danger. They never spoke to humans directly, but those who encountered them reported hearing whispered words of encouragement that seemed to come from the wind itself. Chief Grimwald, humbled by his encounter with the supernatural, became a changed leader. He forbade all raids against peaceful settlements and instead directed his warriors to protect trade routes and defend the weak. When asked about his transformation, he would only say that he had learned the true meaning of honor from a better man than himself. The cave in the mountains became a place of pilgrimage for warriors seeking to understand the deeper meaning of courage and sacrifice. Many reported experiencing visions there, dreams of a silver-haired warrior who taught them that the greatest strength came not from conquest, but from protection of the innocent. And high above the clouds, when the northern lights painted the sky in brilliant hues, 5 magnificent guardians would sometimes gather at the sacred peak. There they would circle in ancient patterns, their voices raised in songs that carried across the wind to every corner of the northern lands, songs that told of courage, sacrifice, and the eternal bond between protector and protected. In those moments, travelers would pause in their journeys and children would stop their play, all of them somehow knowing that they were hearing something sacred, the voice of a legendary guardian, whose spirit lived on in those he had died to protect, watching over the Northlands for all eternity. The name Torvin Stormheart was never forgotten, becoming synonymous with selfless heroism and the highest ideals of northern virtue. And in the cave where it all began, the glowing shrine remained as testament to a simple truth, that immortality comes not from living forever, but from giving one's life for something greater than oneself. Thank you for watching this epic tale of sacrifice and legend. If this story moved you, please share it with others who love incredible Viking adventures. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories from the Age of Legends, and let us know in the comments which part of Torvin's journey touched your heart the most.